Antes de ello, les solicito que durante su desarrollo mantengan sus teléfonos celulares
Your
en
phones
silencio.
on
Muchas gracias.
silent. Thank you very much.
Señoras y señores,
Ladies and
tengan todos
gentlemen,
ustedes muy buenas tardes.
very good
La
afternoon.
Universidad de
The
Chile
Universidad de
agradece su
Chile thanks you
presencia
for your
en
presence
este
in this
simbólico
symbolic
espacio
university
universitario,
space,
nuestro salón
our
de honor,
Hall of Honor,
espacio que hoy
which is a space that allows us all to spend time with Mr. President of the Republic of Croatia, Mr. Zoran Milanovic, who has chosen our university as the place from which he will carry out his conference on geopolitics and its impact on the economy. We would like to greet with special honor the authorities, Professor Rosa Deves, Rector of the University of Chile, His Excellency Mr. Zoran Milanovic, the President of Croatia, Mira Martinic, Ambassador of Croatia here in Chile, Ms. Magdalena Gandulfo, University Comptroller Dr. Pilar Varva, and Extension and Communications Head, and Ms. Productora, University of Chile, and Josiane Bonfoy, Vice President of Student Affairs and Community Affairs, Ms. Jimena Fuernes, Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs, and the members of the delegation, presidential delegation, who are visiting us today, as well as the members of the University Council, members of the University Senate, authorities of the diplomatic corps, ambassadors, representatives of international organizations, university authorities, students from the government faculty in the International Institute and the Faculty of Philosophy, university community, special guests, and friends. We would likewise like to greet all of those who are with us today on our YouTube channel, the University of Chile's YouTube channel, where we are broadcasting the ceremony both in English and in Spanish. We would like to invite you all to participate in this discussion, which is also broadcasting or also sharing your comments. Firstly, I would like to invite our rector, Professor Rosa Deves Alessandri, who will give her opening remarks. Good afternoon, everyone. Your Excellency, Mr. President Zoran Milanovic, welcome to Chile. Her Excellency Mira Martinic, Ambassador of the Republic of Croatia in Chile, all the authorities, both from the university and the government, as well as the community in general that is with us today in this very important gathering. It is an honor to receive Mr. President Zoran Milanovic at the University of Chile and to have the opportunity of hearing his vision and view on geopolitics and its impact on the economy. In these uncertain times where international cooperation is absolutely essential, his visit also allows us to reflect upon the role of universities in global context. Both countries face common challenges which require global solutions, which also calls us as academic communities to work very closely with society and to strengthen dialogue with decision makers. That is why we deeply thank you for your presence, which allows us to open our point of view and which also invites a broad audience as you to talk about these very important topics. The relationships between our countries are very close, both culturally and economically, socially, and politically, as has been recognized during your visit, Mr. President. And we also have this shared history will also impact our future. In the 1990s, we began very close political and social projects for our countries. Chile came back to democracy after many long years of dictatorship, and Croatia declared its independence. The Chilean government was the first in Latin America in recognizing the Republic of Croatia's independence, and in its gratitude, we have received much immigration from Croatia, which has been so important for our country. We're also pioneers in creating diplomatic and diplomatic relationships with Croatia in the capital city. Hence, we have the ambassador visiting us. And as part of immigration, Croatians began taking on important positions in our society, both in the north and the south. Your descendants have enriched our cultural area with distinguished poets, sculptors, medical personnel, scientists, politicians, as well as our president. Our president, Gabriel Boric, is a descendant from Croatian immigrants. And back in Professor Lagos's presidency, he traveled to Croatia to honor Croatian immigrants, and with a commemorative plaque, he praised the relationship between our countries. In gratitude to immigrants who came to Chile and the laborious mothers, fathers, and children from the country, and you have contributed to the greatness of our country. And ever since then, guests from many different places have continued to strengthen our relationships, and music has been a very important part of our relationship with our 30-year anniversary of Chile-Croatia relations. And in September, in Lisinski, Zagreb, theater, with the participation of the Philharmonic of Zagreb, with the National Symphonic Director, Mr. Rodolfo Sanglimbeni, and Luis Alberto Larratorre, who played the piano, by a Chilean-Croatian writer, Solovera. And in May in this year, the Philharmonic of Santiago was directed by a Croatian director in Las Condes, and we are very proud that our symphonic orchestra has its home here at the Universidad de Chile, which has represented University of Chile in this embrace between the two countries. We would also like to honor some of our great professors who are of Croatian origin, and we do that in the name of many others who we are unable to name because there are so many Croatians who have been a part of our university and in our country. Alenka Franolic, who was a journalist, and she had a journalist award and was in our university. She was the first woman who began journalism work here in Chile. And in her name, we also honor those women who migrated here and who filled our country with life. Those women who are not registered in any place and who generously educated their children in this country, in this new country. Alejandro Goic and Alfredo Ladrisic, great medical practitioners, deans of medicine at our university at different points of time, and we remember their significant input into endocrinology and internal medicine, as well as in medicine in general and in social justice, and their continual service. And Mr. Janisic, who was a geneticist and a professor of many different generations, and he was recognized with Natural Sciences Awards, and who was also trained by another eminent Croatian descent, Dr. Gabriel Livasic. And amongst the many things that he did, he worked in the eradication of malaria in Chile. And just a few days ago, we have said farewell to Professor Marinovic, who did much in our university teaching about the therapeutic value of art. This is a very significant moment to be able to honor her. And to wrap up, I would like to mention that our very tight ties in immigration reminds us that we must see the other as an equal and to share in their dignity. That is why we agree with you when you say, Mr. President, that I want a country of equals. We join you in that, and that also represents the mission of our university. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rector, for your kind words. And now I would like to ask Dorotea Lopez, Director of the Institute of International Studies for University, who is going to do the introduction of President So, Mr. President, so after that, we're going to have a segment for Q&A from our audience. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Tefes and Mr. President of the Republic of Croatia, Zoran Milanovic, dear Undersecretary and dear Ambassador of Croatia in Chile, and Ambassador of Chile in Croatia, ambassadors, and specifically dear students that are here today. It is a great pleasure to introduce President Milanovic. He is an attorney from the Sacred University. He received the Award of Excellence provided by the rector of the same university. After that, he participates in the International Championship of the main law schools from the International Court of The Hague. After that, he has the Master in Law from the Free University of Brussels. He started his professional area in the Zagreb Commercial Court in 1983. He started at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Croatia in 1994. He was a member of the Peace Corps for the Cooperation in Europe in Azerbaijan. Between 1996 and 1999, he was the consul in the mission of Croatia in front of the NATO and the European Union. In 2013, he is going to be the consultant from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in charge of the multilateral politics. And he is the chair of the Democratic Party in Croatia. And then he is going to be the president who is supervisor of the negotiation between the Croatia Republic and the European Union. At the beginning of 2018, he is a member of the parliament, and he was until the year from 2008 to 2011, president and chairman of the parliament as a member of the coalition, which is called Cocorico. They won in the elections of 2011. He was the first minister in the Republic of Croatia, and then Croatia is a member of the European Union. After that, he works in a brief period to the freedom of the exercise of his profession. In 2019, he comes back to the politics world, and in 2020, he won the presidencies, and he is the 5th president of the Republic of Croatia. Two sentences have been very important. I want Croatia to be a community of solidarity, when we want a country of the equals. And the second one is our republic needs everybody, and everybody in Croatia needs to have the opportunity to find a way to live with dignity from decent work onwards. Once again, I would like to thank the University of Chile to have the privilege to listen to his vision about economy and geopolitics in a complex that is so complex at a world level. I would like to huge success in the rest of the division, especially tomorrow, because you have an interesting soccer match. So good luck on that. Thank you very much for the presentation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, before we introduce the conference, once again, after this presentation, we're going to have a segment for Q&A. Questions that can be done by using a microphone, and we can reach the microphone towards your seat. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to President Zoran Milanovic for the conference of geopolitics and the impact in economy. The floor is yours, Mr. President.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, members of the Academy, Madam Rector, Madam Professor, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to address this legacy university of South America and Chile, and actually you've done the privilege to me, rather than the other way around, me doing privilege to you to address you here. You painted quite a rosy picture of my country at moments. At moments, I thought with what amazement Croats back home would stare at you, listening to the kind words that you were depicting us with as a nation and as an immigrant contributing to the betterment and the destiny of this country. I would like to add to the introductory remarks about who I am and what I did in my life one maybe missing element in the puzzle, that is, as a politician, as a leader of the political party for a whole decade, I was of liberal, left, labor, socialist provenance, so that's my orientation. And that's what I stood for the most of my political life. And you know what that agenda comprises. It's workers' rights, it's minority rights, LGBT, and all those things that make life of the modern society, as opposed to the life that was lived by our forebears and ancestors only a couple of decades ago. So the topic of the lecture is kind of pretentious. I'm not a lecturer. I'm barely a lawyer because my practicing days are long gone, they are bygones. I was a diplomat for a decade and a half, and since the early years of this century, I'm a politician. And once elected to the office of President of the Republic of Croatia by the popular vote of the electorate, I'm constitutionally obliged to renounce any party membership. So I'm not exactly political, but then again, not super political. I should represent all the citizens of the country, but then again, without mindset, without worldview, without ideology, you're an empty box. So this is the reason why I was urged to tell you who politically I am and where I stood and where I'm still standing. Now, geopolitics and economy. I said I'm not the best suited for a lecturer, and whoever on my part, for my staff, coined this title for the lecture, Geopolitics and Economy, I think it's pretty much punching above my real weight, you know. President of Croatia, a country with a population of barely 4 million, speaking about geopolitics and its impact on economy. Okay, well, it's huge. To start with an answer, of course it's huge, but I mean, then again, it could be uttered by anybody having a driver's license or diploma of the elementary school. There is a huge impact of geopolitics, and there always was, and there will always be. Now, where we do stand, where my country stands in the realm of geopolitics, we're not there. We never were. As a country, we were burdened, overloaded with the amount and contents of history in the last century, and 30 years ago as well. If there's any place that history didn't rest in Europe, it was former Yugoslavia, Croatia. And that's the environment from which we emerged. But geopolitics, it hardly is. Geopolitics is, and I assume, given the nature of this topic, that some of you or many of you are students of international relations and international law and stuff like that. Geopolitics is Eurasia, it's a pivot. It's the huge continental mass consisting mostly of Russia and China, Europe as a western appendix, and the rest are the oceans, the boundless sea, and actually South America is not really geopolitics for its better and for its benefit. Wars in former Yugoslavia were never about geopolitics. It was rather a bloody nose divorce settlement before the members of the same matrimony or estate who quarreled and then pushed apart and ran away from each other, but geopolitics it wasn't. Now what has been unfolding in Russia with Russian attack on Ukraine, that is geopolitics. And that louds and looms large, that's bigger than life. It's dangerous, it's threatening, and it needs quick resolution. But again, for a moment, back to the topic. Geopolitics and its impact on economy, namely the impact of the current affairs and the situation in Central Eastern Europe, will be huge. But then again, that's my assessment, and it's open to discussion and to dissent from any of you during the question and answer session. I think it's going to mark the world different than what we have known, different from the world that was over the last couple of decades. The centricity of American dollar will slowly but surely disappear. It will be there and stay for quite some time. That petrodollar will not be anymore what we were used to and what we lived with. Simply, it's the repositioning of the world order. China is too big. It's different. It's different from us, from Europeans, from our values. And wherever and whenever I go abroad, and the older I am, that's also what counts. The older I am, the more experienced or the more corrupt I am, whichever you like, the better. Corrupt not in material terms, but in moral terms. The more hesitant I am to preach my religion and my social religion to other people. So one size doesn't fit all. Not even in my country, not even in my capital, as opposed to the provincial town of Dalmatia, where people go to church more frequently and have different values. But China, it's a whole new ballgame. Russia is different. So I'm not here to moralize, to be wokish, to emanate the message that I'm better, that I should be, and the values that I stand for should be something that you should be ashamed of if not practicing. No. I cherish democracy. I couldn't possibly live in a society that is not based on democracy, and democracy, I see it, because many claim that do have democracy, but actually they do not. But realistically, with all the changes that I anticipate, and I think anybody who's been following this topic must be anticipating. Otherwise, I mean, it's blindness that the destiny of the world, I know this sounds profound, it's pretentious, rests with an agreement between Russia and America. Nothing moral about that, nothing nice about that, but that's reality. These are the only two countries that cannot be destroyed physically and that cannot be exhausted or annihilated economically on different levels and different requirements and expectations from given populations. Both of the countries, to present that vividly and in plastic fashion, can be fenced around with a barbed wire and survive. China could not because it's resource dependent. Russia and America are not. No, those two societies, those two political systems could not be more different. I grew up with American role model, with American academic sponsors, with American counterparts in diplomacy. I was NATO man from the very first day or week. I stood as an agent of my country's accession to NATO. All those things crafted me and formed me as a politician, and not as a person, because I was made as a person a long time ago, but as a politician, certainly yes. What lies ahead? There was a word earlier this day, I think it was uttered by President Gabriel Boric, about the importance of the role of the United Nations in the world order and collective actions in the quest and drive for attainment of the higher goals. But actually there is a whole separate body of international law and a treaty pool that includes only two countries. That's Russia and America, and it's the arms control regime, nuclear arms. None of those were arranged within the UN, within Security Council, within General Assembly, within regional initiatives. It was Reagan-Gorbachev, for the most part. And we've been seeing that elaborately planned and implemented system on which the most brilliant minds of diplomacy worked for a generation, being slowly peeled off year after year. Americans, Russians. Now, important matter, point of my experience, or scholarly conventional wisdom, if you will. The great powers are paranoid concerning their security and safety. They see everything or anything as a threat. Everything is threatening. And that's realism, and that's geopolitics. In this world, these two countries have to cooperate and to be fully aware. I know this is wishful thinking, it is, because we brought ourselves to the point that we have to rely on wishful thinking. It's a serious moment. There is nothing much more substantive I could tell. But if these two countries, each of them having 600 and more active and deployable nuclear warheads, and China and France and England, or UK, shortly England, following suit with 300 each respectively, which is negligible. So Russia and America, they hold world under ransom. It's a blackmail, and it's only them, not the UN. European Union is not a player. I don't know whether there are any EU ambassadors or diplomats around. It was my quest as well, European Union. I stood as a Croatian Prime Minister on the very night that Croatia joined the EU. I delivered a speech in front of the audience in Central Square, Zagreb, which is a dream come true for every European, Western-oriented politician. But it's been like a decade ago, and it's time for balancing, the papers and doing accountancy. What we got and what exactly can we do. European Union suffers from the profound lack of legitimacy and democratic accountability. People who speak on behalf of the EU, with whom I might be associated closely on personal basis, which is less and less, on the value basis, are not democratically accountable to anybody. President of the Commission, vice presidents of the Commission, people in charge and people disposing with tons of money, more and more fiat money, printed money, elusive money. European Parliament is elected by the people of the continent, but that bond, that umbilical cord is being cut immediately, and that mother-child relationship is no more. European Commission is executive, but it's not elected by the parliamentary majority, but rather by wheeling dealing in the backdoor rooms of the European Council by the heads of state and government. So it's not a very rosy picture, but it couldn't be black either, as long as this precondition is met. And there is not much I can do on that. I can just make a point. So European Union and its representatives can talk as much as they please. The UN can be passing its resolutions, Security Council resolutions, which, by the way, in earnest, in detail, regulated the Russian-Ukrainian conflict from the outset, from 2014. I was Prime Minister of Croatia then, and actually I was sitting and working within the European Council, which is the umbrella political body of the EU, consisting of 27, 28 heads of state and government. And that was transponded into international law, obliging every party to the conflict to work and give its due. For that to be implemented, for sanctions against Russia to be abolished, but nobody seems to actually really, in earnest, want it to be implemented. Now we have a war. Ukraine is better armed. Actually, it's draining Western resources we are burning through the reserves to help them. We, meaning mostly Americans, because the resources of the others are laughable. And Russians, they also managed to avail themselves of the period of 8 years to create a much sturdier independence, financially, economically, militarily, to hit new grounds, so that essentially we cannot do anything substantive anymore. That's reality. So, given this privilege to speak before you and bringing my introductory remarks to close, this is something I wanted in broad lines to share with you. This is something that you will not necessarily hear or be broadcast to from the mainstream media, because mainstream media of the West have lost my trust and my devotion, if you will, because that's something I was raised on. And to the Russian, I never trusted anyway, so I'm out in the cold. and something that I found as a pillar of democracy. Actually, it was one of the topics of my inaugural speech: free academia, independent research, free judiciary couldn't be more important than that, and free media. The last vanished. It's just PR. Depends on who pays the check. That's reality of the West. Sorry to say that, folks, but that's reality. And from my eyes, and beauty and horror is always in the eyes of the beholder, and I'm just beholder here. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to your questions and your dissent.
Sí, les quiero solicitar que
I would like to request you all to ask your questions either in English or in Spanish. We do have interpretation for that to be possible. So we will take the microphone to you. Just raise your hand so that we can deliver the microphone to you. Thank you very much. Primero que todo, buenas tardes. Es un privilegio para mí poder estar aquí. Soy estudiante de Relaciones Internacionales, entonces es un tema muy interesante. Todo lo que usted habló fue muy interesante. Y mi pregunta es que usted habla de lo poderosos que son esos países y que no hay casi nada que podamos hacer para detenerlos. Entonces, ¿usted cree que habrá en algún momento alguna organización o algo que podría limitar a esos países, o cree que la anarquía en la que estamos viviendo o con la que estamos lidiando durará hasta por siempre, hasta que no ocurra algo trágico?
No, the Americans will pursue their basic instincts and interests. They're very pragmatic people. They are not self-destructive. So are the Russians to a certain extent. And everything that we say should be measured through that optic and with that metric in mind. It's simply as that and terrible as that. Yes, there is no way, to make those two countries do something that ultimately doesn't please them. So, what kind of negotiations that means? Something that will, I don't know, please Russia, not displease America too much, or the other way around. I don't see another outcome. I mean, we are bleeding money, which is less of a problem. And we are draining our military resources. When I say we, I mean American West. Political West, not American West. And Americans in the first place. Sending arms to Ukraine, seeing Ukrainians being killed in scores every day, every week, sending them thousands of shells and grenades, which, by the way, cannot be produced at a required pace in America anymore, because this is not a World War II economy. It's strictly profit-oriented. So the Russians have specially earmarked industry which produces what's told by the government and even invents some things. Americans do it for money, just for money. And it's a hamper, it's a huge impediment to wage this kind of war, because this is not war with a third world country. This is not America against Iraq. This is not Godzilla versus Bambi, or Mickey Mouse. This is for real. And this is bound to last, because Russians can afford that. And they will not blink to contemplate alternative. As simple and as terrible as that. And that's my experience. And on the top of that, I've watched that from the outset. I was a prime minister back in 2014 when depending on the Rashomon, on the who looks at a topic, from which angle. Some say it was democratic revolution. Many say it was coup d'etat, where the legitimate, albeit antipathic government was toppled by the West to the irritation of Moscow. And it's a war now. We had Angela Merkel the other day admitting, I don't know why, maybe polishing her own tainted image in Germany. I don't know what is the current state of her image in Germany at this point. But actually what she said, that the whole politics and the policy of the West from 2015 till the outbreak of hostilities or the Russian incursion was about buying time and letting Ukraine to arm herself and to prepare for the war. That's what she said on the record to the Zeit journal. If true, that's terrible. Because you have also allowed Russia to isolate and insulate herself from the Western influence. And there is not much we can do at this point. In 2014, if the Visa card, master and diners were abolished and denied to Russia, they would collapse. They would have collapsed, not today. So this was not wise, this was not intelligent, this was not even street smart on the part of the West. If we wanted to go this way, the war should have started sooner rather than later. Because it turns out that the war was the inevitable outcome. I don't believe that, but that's what I say.
Pregunta en español.
Buenas tardes, presidente. En relación a su parte final de la exposición de la conferencia en sí, hizo mención a educación.
You mentioned.
I don't have any response here.
Hello, can you hear me? 1, 2,
La parte
testing,
final de su
testing.
exposición hizo
1, 2,
referencia
testing,
a la
testing.
educación y también a los medios de comunicación.
1, 2, 3.
En ese mismo sentido, con la mirada europea de avanzar en una educación de calidad y gratuita, ¿cómo se busca financiar dicho proceso? ¿Cómo se ha realizado ese acompañamiento para que las universidades locales de sus países específicos puedan...
I'm not following you. I don't hear a word of translation.
Él no está escuchando una palabra de la interpretación.
Can you? Is there somebody who
Testing.
could consecutive-
Can you hear me? This is the interpretation booth. Can you hear me now?
Well, let's try another one.
Okay. Mr. President, this is the interpreter.
This one is much better.
This is the interpreter speaking. Can you hear me? Okay, good.
This is as it should be.
Sí, ahora sí funciona.
The first one
So-
must have been Russian.
Sí, el primer dispositivo seguramente que era ruso, por eso no funcionaba. So I would like to know, how do you work in European universities and the countries themselves in order to make sure that your students will have access to free education? Because you made a comment about that. And another question is regarding the media, mass media. How can we do to make the information transparent and also for that information to be checked?
Question, which of course does not have anything to do with geopolitics as much as my lecture did not have anything remotely with geopolitics, which is, by the way, a sort of very contentious, actually, it became a very contentious term. Geopolitics is mostly associated with its founder and its Haushofer of Germany, who was more than Nazi sympathizer, so it's not very healthy. But nevertheless, free education, you said. I think it's absolutely instrumental in building inclusive and open society. I don't know, and I'm not here to preach, because I told you I'm not that wokish to go around and preach my values, but in the broad outlines, we're being told stories and sold packages all the time, you know. We were sold package, for instance, about the sublime and superior Chilean pension system through investment funds, which works to a certain extent, but actually it's another stupid American invention, you know, which was kind of, you know, guinea pigged here. I don't know whether it works. We're told it works in Chile. In Croatia, it worked splendid first 20 years before the first pensioners were due to be paid. Now it doesn't. So it's as if, you know, the light bulb works in the dark, but when you switch it on and it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Same thing with education. So I learned that you are, and don't get me wrong, because I'm not legislator here, but to charge massively, to charge anything, okay, but to charge massively at public universities, for me it's contradictio in adjecto, so it's contradiction in terms. They should be free of charge, and strict. In Croatia, it's free. It's maybe not the best in Europe, certainly it isn't, but the reputation of public universities is it stays, head and shoulders above that of private universities, because private universities are usually some murky, backstage deals to get diploma without much effort. And it's been recognized and simply, decomposed by the society and by the media. This is where the media played decent role, So public university stands for decency and quality in Croatia, and it's free of charge. And it's been free of charge since the beginning of history. And even more so since the 1945, because it was quid pro quo, a trade-off between the government after the World War II and the population. The population was stripped of its democratic rights. Many of those rights that were enjoyed by the large share of population prior to the World War II, during Kingdom of Yugoslavia. It was dysfunctional, corrupt state, but more democratic than Germany or Austria, or Italy for that matter. They had kind of free elections. It was abolished during Tito's communism, but new horizons were open. Free Medicare, unheard of to that point. Something that Chinese workers and peasants had to wait for 50 years. Our people would rebel. So there was a need for trade-off. You don't vote, but we take care. You're taken care of. You're provided for. So your kids will go to gymnasium, to high-quality high schools, and then they will have an opportunity to go to the capital, not Vienna anymore, and get a decent or European class education for free. That's the essence. My son went to the law school in the Netherlands. Why Netherlands? Why abroad in the first place? To study law, which is not a science in the first place. That's another topic. But he went, And it does cost a bit, but actually it's free of charge. And all those universities are public, and they're free, and they're world class. They're as good as any American university. Maybe they cannot compete with Harvard, but many crazy ideas came from Harvard, especially in the financial world. Detrimental, selfish, blah, 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 or Chicago for that matter. But that's in Germany. United Kingdom, well, they started charging some years ago, and they continue to charge, and we see how the story unfolds. So I'm all for that. That's my cause. Free quality education, because it raised from the deprivation with poverty the whole generation of Croatian boys and girls, of peasant and fisherman stock. Before that, it was not accessible to them. It's democracy, in a nutshell. But also, not to overreach, because we've seen that trend in Europe. More and more people getting university degree. Now, this is the audience that should be receptive to the pinch of political incorrectness for my part. But academy is not for everybody. It should be elite. Well, maybe not as a World Cup finals in soccer, but elite. Not for everybody. So when I hear that above 50% of population are holders of some kind of university degrees, I'm skeptical. That's as if everybody driving Mercedes. It's not Mercedes anymore. It's not meant to be driven by everybody. That's the mystique of something that is of good quality. It should not be automatically attainable. And thus, I really support and appreciate that kind of selfish and self-absorbed attitude of Croatian public universities, even molesting students to a certain extent. You will not pass my exam, which is very, weird sometimes, but it's strict, and there are criteria. And it's not pay as you go. Okay, it's 40,000 euro per faculty, you go, as long as you pay. That's the wrong approach. And your second question was on, well, I think the first one was long enough. I mean, you will not benefit much from my answer anyway. But public, free higher education, and yes, very few public, very few private schools of first and second degree in Croatia. In particular, elementary schools. They're all public, with few exceptions, like Jewish school or Mohammedan school, but mostly public, and very standardized in quality, and same as it ever was. And when I was a kid, and when my kids went to school these years, we were socially inclusive and very mixed in composition of class. So my folks were people with university degrees, but my friends and colleagues in the classroom in the same desk were guys, girls, and boys whose parents were the same or factory workers. There were no unemployed people back then. Everybody worked, and everybody works these days. But we were of social mixture, and we lived together. And that was, well, I didn't notice that. That was something completely normal to me. And the best students at the qualification enrollment exams for the university come from public schools. Mathematical, science gymnasium, general gymnasium, classical program involving Greek and Latin. It's still being taught in Croatia, less and less though, because classical education matters. You have the sculpture of Dante Alighieri here. No. You don't have Henry Miller.
Mi nombre es Alejandro Barros. Primero que todo, agradecerle por el tiempo que se ha dedicado a nosotros. Así que muchas gracias.
Given us. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us this opportunity as well. My question is, humanity really wants to be able to move forward to a global community. Unfortunately, the desire of the states don't really want that, but is there an example of something that has worked in this regard is the European Union as a economic and political conglomerate, which for several decades has been able to survive through the differences that its countries may have and move towards public policy and geopolitical policies that they may have in common. Unfortunately, though, the interests of the nations are not in that line, and there are maybe more extreme political positions that are showing up, and that forces the world to go backwards rather than progress in this regard. However, though we all may want the world to move forward in this direction, I would like to personally ask you about how do you see the future of the European Union? Do you think that they will continue to progress? Do you think that this is a model that could be applied in other parts of the world, and especially the Russia-Ukraine war? Well, personally, I think that it did make more countries wanted to join the European Union as well as NATO because of defense. But these things, for a person like you who knows how things work from the inside, this European community, do you think that it's going along a proper path to be able to progress well? Or do you think that it will fall apart as countries look for their own interests?
Well, there is no such thing as European community.
Bueno, no existe tal cosa como la comunidad europea. Sé que sueno a Margaret Thatcher hace 40 años cuando dijo no hay tal cosa como la sociedad. Claramente existe la sociedad, pero es una locura hablar de la comunidad europea. Es una comunidad de unas cuantas personas de privilegio, de mejor posición, y yo soy el último en quejarme porque soy una persona privilegiada, entonces no le tengo envidia a nadie. Yo
high paycheck and the life of leisure and enjoyment. But it doesn't exist, which doesn't mean that it should not survive. And that is exactly the word you've used. Huh? It managed to survive. So we really got together just to survive? Or we could have done it separately, in the old way. Or there is added value to that. Now, being raised and brought up in the country of Yugoslavia, which was packed together in the aftermath of the World War I. supposedly to get an added synergy, added value for Slavic people living on the southeast of Europe, barely managed to achieve anything, because one of the roles besides security and safety, which is paramount role of every state and every political system, it's security first and foremost. Preservation of life, way of living and property and borders, supposedly was to increase standards and to harmonize between those less developed and those more developed, because as we know, the level of standard and the GDP per capita differed vastly from Slovenia to Kosovo to the south by factor of 3. And we managed to diverge. After 70 years, it grew to factor 5. So actually, it was for the worse of those deprived. System didn't work. And it created dissent and dissatisfaction. And everybody was dissatisfied. The Northerners, because they didn't want to live in the community with hillbillies and rednecks anymore, the way they view them. And those to the south, because they've been exploited. Of course, the truth in this case is somewhere in between. But again, it's in the nature of the truth not to be the place we wish it to be. So the truth is not always in between. That's for lazy students, huh? The truth has to be sought after. But in this very case, the truth really was in between. Now, European Union, decades after its inception and glorious and noble ideas about harmonization and regional policies and regional funds and structural funds, which are supposed to increase the level of development in those regions that are deprived, that are below certain average of the EU, where do we stand? The differences are pretty much the same as they ever were. Pretty much the same. And I challenge anybody to challenge me on that. The richest countries are still the richest. Those, because there are no really basket cases and poor countries. But those who were at the baseline barely moved. They moved a bit. So one cynical person would conclude that the system was designed to keep the distance between the runners in the lanes. That's the outcome. That's how I see it. The overall withdrawal of European funds, average for 10-year period, first 10 years, by the Republic of Croatia. So the surplus that we as a state in general, all the funds, all the projects included on an annual basis, the average surplus over first decade, and it's increasing a bit, but the average is less than $1 billion per year for the whole country. When you put on balance the amount that we pay and what we receive, the surplus is less than $1 billion. It's token money, even for Croatia, it's nothing. It's 1/2 of the budget, annual budget of Croatian capital, Zagreb. The budget is €2 billion, and the city is barely 1,800,000. It's a good budget. You can pave a lot of roads and make many sewages with that. Now, that's what we get. And don't talk to me about values, because I know what my values are. I didn't come from the cave, Nor anybody came from the cave. Now, to bring together Estonians and Portuguese and pretend that it's just a matter of time, it's fanciful. It's not real. Those who mingle and socialize together in the city, famous city of Brussels, yes, they are very, very close together, but we are talking about trickles of the trickles of the trickles of the people. It's not realistic, because we are defined as a society. We have history, we have our manifest destinies, which are not racist as some under that label in the United States. We differ a lot. And that's not even a wealth, that's reality. I will not claim that diversity is something great. Most of the time it creates problems in societies that are not self-contained or self-aware enough to know where is the limit. So you import foreign workforce to the level of saturation, and then you realize actually that you had enough and that it's overdose for you. Because it felt so well, to have all those Filipino and Muslim world people working for trickle of the Western paycheck and actually help economy grow. But those people, yes, they settle, they procreate, they have kids, they have habits, they have their cultural limits or openness, and all of them have to live together. And it creates, in my view, a problem that is becoming insurmountable for Western Europe. And again, you're talking with very liberal politician. In 2015, when 1 million people rushed into Europe, and when the barbed wire fences were erected around Europe and Hungary and the neighboring countries, and I think they're not bad neighbors, but I was among the few who said, just go through. So no walls, just go. We're going to take care of you for those few days. You go west, because eventually, at a certain point, it will have to stop, and it did. After 1 million people passed, all those fence builders came of age, and the fences were eventually erected. So it was not possible anymore to pass from Greece to Macedonia. But I simply didn't want mine and our collective psyche, if you will, the conscience, to be tainted by the fact that we erected walls for the people. But everything has limits. There is the limit. If you go beyond, if you extend NATO too much, it has its price. I was adamant. I was an agent of Croatian accession to NATO. Not Estonian. I mean, I wish them the best, but I couldn't care less after all, because I was selfish. And that's my job description. Statesmen are selfish, not mean, just selfish. Okay. So, if this was my final note, that's appalling. I mean, selfish. I wish you all the best.
Muy bien, damos las gracias al excelentísimo señor presidente de la República.
Your Excellency, Mr. Zoran Milanovic, President of the Republic of Croatia, thank you very much for your talk, Geopolitics and its impact on economy. We are now closing this gathering, and we would like to very sincerely thank you all for your presence here. We would like to thank our university community and our esteemed guests. We wish you a very fruitful visit in our country and in all the countries that you're going to be visiting over the next few days. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you all very much for your presence here. Have a very good afternoon.